First are children hip-hop all over the suburbs. And now Buckwell might be president? They are taking over every aspect of our culture. Don't you agree, Mr. Feather?
Word. For sheezy, my leezy.
What did you say?
I said, for sure. Yes, indeedy.
I have a cold. I want the White House to stay white. Eliminate him!
What's good, everybody? RJ here, and this is Coffee and Convos. Welcome back to the channel. This is my reading voice. This is a space for conversation, thought, and reflection. I'm here to think out loud, ask better questions, and challenge the stories we're told to accept without examination. You're welcome here. So grab a cup, take a breath, and let's have a real conversation. In the 2002 film Undercover Brother.
This is Undercover Brother.
Hey, how you doing, brother? Good morning. Good morning. Get on the desk. You gonna spy around me? Culture. Spy in the building. Don't touch the fro. Back up off me.
A shadowy organization known as The Man secretly manipulates politics, media, and culture to suppress black empowerment and maintain racial hierarchy. The film presents the conspiracy as satire, exaggerating boardroom villains and coded plots for comedic effect. Yet, the character of The Man represents something largely more than parody. It symbolizes institutions and ideologies that resist black political autonomy while hiding behind legitimacy and authority. What the film renders as fiction for laughter reflects a deeper historical truth about power operating quietly through systems rather than spectacle. Decades before that satire reached the screen, J.Edgar Hoover built a real federal intelligence apparatus that functioned with similar invisibility. As director of the FBI from 1924 to 1972, Hoover transformed domestic surveillance into a central instrument of national security. Under his leadership, programs like COINTELPRO targeted political movements deemed threatening to the American order. Hoover did not present himself as a villain. He framed his mission as protection, yet the strategies he authorized reveal a man who treated black political organization not simply as dissent but as in danger. Hoover was born in 1985 in Washington, D.C. and entered the Justice Department during World War I. In 1919, amid national unrest, he became a head of the General Intelligence Division. That year marked a turning point in American political culture. The nation experienced the Red Summer of racial violence and a wave of anarchist bombings that fueled panic and internal subversion. Attorney General of A. Mitchell Palmer launched what became known as the Palmer Raids, mass arrests and deportations of suspects and radicals. Hoover helped compile intelligence files and coordinated investigations during this period, refining techniques of centralized surveillance and political monitoring that would define his career. The conflation of radical politics with national instability shaped Hoover's worldview. Dissent was not simply disagreement. It was the fact that he seen it as danger. Before J. Edgar Hoover became the most powerful law enforcement figure in America, he was a young bureaucrat inside the Department of Justice during the first Red Scare. In 1919, working under Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer, Hoover helped build the General Intelligence Division, which was tasked with identifying and neutralizing so-called submersives. Among those he targeted was Marcus Garvey, whose Universal Negro Improvement Association had grown into one of the largest black nationalist movements in the world. Hoover saw Garvey not simply as a political activist, but as a destabilizing force capable of organizing black people independently of white control. Unable to deport Garvey immediately, Hoover assigned agents to infiltrate the UNIA, gathering intelligence and look for criminal leverage. The Bureau ultimately pursued Garvey on federal mail fraud charges tied to the Black Star Line shipping venture, leading to his conviction in 1923 and later deportation in 1927. Whether one views the case as legitimate persecution or political motivated targeting, the pattern is very clear. From early on, Hoover's career was shaped by the surveillance and disruption of black political organizations, establishing a model of state power that would later expand under COINTELPRO. During the Cold War, the logic expanded. COINTELPRO was formally launched in 1956 to target Communist Party in the USA. Its stated goal was to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize groups considered subversive. Operations required reporting to the FBI headquarters, demonstrating centralized oversight rather than rogue field activity. Over time, the target list widened beyond communism. Civil rights leaders, black nationalist organizations, and student groups came under surveillance. The Senate Select Committee to Study Governmental Operations, commonly known as the Church Committee, later concluded that the FBI had engaged in covert actions designed to undermine lawful political activity. Parallel to the Red Scare was the Lavender Scare. In the 1950s, thousands of federal employees were investigated or dismissed due to the suspected homosexuality, which was framed as security risk because of alleged vulnerability to blackmail. The FBI played a role in these investigations. During the same period, long-standing rumors circulated regarding Hoover's unusually close relationship with Clyde Tulsa. Historians remain divided, and definitive evidence regarding Hoover's sexuality has never emerged. Allegations about cross-dressing are widely addressed, but lack of conclusive proof.
There was another way in which the Mafia could have learned of Hoover's homosexuality. In the late 1950s, Hoover was a regular visitor at the home of Meyer Lansky's friend, the former bootlegger Louis Rosenstiel, and his wife Susan.
I found out early in the marriage that my husband was bisexual. He was involved with Roy Cohn, the assistant counsel to Senator McCarthy. So one day Rosenstiel said, "We're going to go this evening to the Plaza Hotel." And Roy Cohn was there. And he said, "You'll be very much surprised at what you'll see." And we knocked on the door, and Roy Cohn opened the door. And we went in, and there was this gentleman. He was dressed as a woman, and Roy introduced me. He said, "I'd like you to meet Mary." Well, I knew the name wasn't Mary because he looked just like J.Edgar Hoover. In fact, he was very solid looking, and he had like a little growth, and he was dressed in a black chiffon dress, very short with ruffles, and a black lace stockings, and high heel shoes, and a black curly wig, and black false eyelashes. And he was sitting, he crossed his legs.
Now, wait a minute. You're saying it looked like J. Edgar Hoover, or it was clearly to you J. Edgar Hoover?
It was clearly to me J. Edgar Hoover.
The analytical significance lies not in the speculation, but in the paradox. Hoover presided over a government campaign that equated personal identity with national vulnerability while guarding his own private life with extreme secrecy. The culture of surveillance extended across ideological, racial, and sexual lines. The difference was framed as deviance, and that deviance was a threat. But it also could be a threat to his own sexuality and his own reputation. This logic reached explicit clarity in an internal FBI memorandum warning of the potential rise of a black messiah who could unify and electrify black nationalist movements. The memo did not focus narrowly on crime, it focused on influence. It identified the type of leader federal intelligence feared: charismatic figure capable of coalition building across racial and class lines posed a greater threat. This is not merely a fear of criminality. It was a fear of cohesion. When federal intelligence defines black unity as national threat and reveals something deeper than scrutiny and anxiety. It reveals an institutional commitment to preserving the existing order. In my view, Hoover's directives function as a defense of racial hierarchy, protecting the system in which black political autonomy was destabilizing precisely because it challenged who held power. The FBI's campaign against Martin Luther King Jr. illustrates this approach in detail. King was wiretapped, surveillanced extensively, and subjected to anonymous letters that suggested he commit to self-delete. These actions occurred despite his public commitment to nonviolence. Surveillance did not depend solely on criminal evidence. It responded to perceived political influence. King advocacy expanded from desegregation to the economy justice and opposition to the Vietnam War.
The promises of the Great Society have been shot down on the battlefield of Vietnam, making the poor, white and Negro, bear the heaviest burdens both at the front and at home. Others can do what they want to do. That's their business. Other civil rights leaders, for various reasons, refuse or can't take a stand or have to go along with the administration. That's their business. But I must say tonight that I know that justice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
That expansion triggered intensified scrutiny. If moderate reform could destabilize the social order, then the order itself becomes the object of being protected. Hoover's posture suggests not simply law enforcement as vigilance, but an effort to preserve a hierarchy that the civil rights activism sought to disrupt. Malcolm X was also monitored closely throughout his leadership in the Nation of Islam and afterward. Under Hoover's direction, the FBI maintained extensive files on him, infiltrated the organization, and tracked internal conflicts. Malcolm's call for black self-determination and global solidarity placed him outside the boundaries of acceptable dissent in Hoover's framework.
The independent African nations did was to form an organization called the Organization of African Unity. The purpose of our Organization of Afro-American Unity, which has the same aim and objective, to fight whoever gets in our way. To bring about the complete independence of people of African descent here in the Western Hemisphere, and first here in the United States, and bring about the freedom of these people by any means necessary.
Gene Roberts was later revealed to be an undercover NYPD officer who embedded himself in Malcolm X's Organization of Afro-American Unity and even rose to the position of head of security. Raymond Wood, a former NYPD officer, later claimed that involvement in operations connected to events surrounding Malcolm X's assassination. These allegations that are still argued but are impossible to ignore. While there is no definitive proof that Hoover orchestrated his assassination, the surveillance culture he built ensured that federal intelligence remained embedded within the movement during the most volatile years. When the demands for dignity are interpreted as insurgency, the line between national security and racial preservation begins to blur. Hoover's surveillance did not simply monitor violence, it monitored ambition. Angela Davis warrants particular attention because her conflict with the federal government fused intellectual radicalism, academia, and criminal prosecution into the national spectacle. Davis was a philosophy professor trained in continental thought and political theory. In 1969, she was hired as an acting assistant professor at the University of California in LA. Her membership in the Communist Party and her association with Black liberation causes led the California Board of Regents to terminate her appointment, citing her political affiliations as grounds for dismissal. The dispute became a flashpoint in the struggle over academic freedom and state power. In 1970, firearms registered in Davis' names were used in an attempted courtroom escape led by Jonathan Jackson during the trial of the Soledad brothers in Marin County, California. The incident resulted in the deaths of a judge and others present. Davis was charged under a theory of conspiracy because the weapons had been purchased in her name. Hoover's FBI moved quickly to classify her as a fugitive aligned with revolutionary violence. He was placed on the 10 most wanted list and became the subject of nationwide manhunt. The federal government framed her not merely as an alleged co-conspirator, but as a symbol of radical threat. Her trial drew international attention, and in 1972, a jury acquitted her of all her charges. Davis' prosecution demonstrated how radical critique of capitalism, prisons, and racial inequality could be reframed as criminal conspiracy. Her presence as a Black woman intellectually challenged structural power, disrupted conventional hierarchies of authority. The federal response reflected more than a legal pursuit. It reflected a discomfort with a redistribution of voice and influence within the system Hoover sought to stabilize. Assata Shakur warrants particular attention because of her conflict with the federal government, brought together Black liberation politics, armed struggle, and the surveillance apparatus of COINTELPRO into a sustained campaign of repression. Born Joanne Chesmar, Shakur became involved with the Black Panther Party before later associating with the Black Liberation Army, a move that placed her squarely within the crosshairs of federal counterintelligence operations. By the early 1970s, she was the subject of extensive surveillance, repeated arrests, and public framing dangerous militant. These encounters were not isolated legal events, but part of a broader strategy designed to disrupt, discredit, and neutralize Black radical movements. The state's attention to Shakur reflected a pattern in which political dissent, particularly within articulated through Black revolutionary frameworks, was interpreted as a domestic threat rather than a constitutional expression. In 1973, a confrontation on the New Jersey Turnpike resulted in the deaths of a state trooper and a member of the Black Liberation Army, leading to Shakur's arrest and subsequent prosecution. Throughout her trial, she maintained that she had been targeted prior to the incident and denied direct involvement in the killing. Critics of the case have pointed into inconsistencies in forensic evidence and the broader context of surveillance tied to the FBI operations against Black activists. Shakur was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment, but in 1979 she escaped custody with assistance from allies and later received political asylum in Cuba. Her case has since remained a point of contention, with supporters framing her as political prisoner shaped by COINTELPRO-era repression, while the federal government continues to classify her as a fugitive. Shakur's trajectory illustrates how state power, legal prosecution, and counterintelligence practice converged to manage and contain radical Black political expression in the late 20th century. The crescendo of Hoover's counterintelligence strategy can be seen in the killing of Fred Hampton in 1969. Hampton was building a rainbow coalition that united Black, Puerto Rican, and poor white activists. Hoover had already issued internal memoranda warning against the rise of a Black messiah capable of unifying and electrifying a movement. Within that framework, Hampton represented precisely the kind of leadership Hoover feared.
Chairman of the state of Illinois, Black Panther Party, Fred Hampton. And a lot of people don't understand the Black Panther Party's relationship with white mother country radicals. A lot of people don't even understand that words that Elvis uses a lot. But what we're saying is that there are white people in the mother country that are for the same types of things that we are for stimulating revolution in the mother country. And we said that we'll work with anybody and form coalition with anybody that has revolution on their mind. We're not a racist organization because we understand that racism is an excuse used for capitalism. And we know that racism is the byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people. And we're going to have to put it back in the hands of the people.
The FBI informant known as William O'Neill provided floor plans of Hampton's apartment. The intelligence flowed through the channels established by Hoover's office. During a pre-drawn raid conducted by the Chicago police, Hampton was shot and killed while he was drugged and asleep.
Party leaders Mark Clark and Fred Hampton were killed in the raid. 4 of the 7 surviving occupants of the apartment were wounded. All were charged with assault and attempted murder.
In any case, we walked back over there and we both were speechless. We just walked through the house and saw what had taken place and where he died, and it was shocking. I had facilitated that raid. I knew that indirectly I had contributed.
FBI headquarters authorized payment of a $300 bonus to informant William O'Neill for, quote, uniquely valuable services which he rendered over the past several months, unquote.
Hampton's coalition threatened more than local politics. It challenged the durability of racial division as a stabilizing force in American governance. If marginalized communities organize across racial lines, the hierarchy that structured political power would weaken. In that sense, the counterintelligence posture that Hoover normalized functioned as a guardian of that status quo of white power. A pattern that emerges across these cases is structural rather than incidental. The Red Massacre, anti-communist surveillance, Lavender Scare, that moral policing, and COINTELPRO, counterintelligence, share an uncommon logic, ideological dissent. Sexual identity, and black political autonomy were all treated as potential threats to national stability. The language of security justified intrusion. Although COINTELPRO was officially discontinued in the 1970s after public exposure and congressional investigation, its methods did not disappear. Domestic intelligence continued under revised guidelines, new task forces, and expanded counterterrorism authorities. The label changed, the legal framework shifted, oversight mechanisms were introduced and later adjusted. Yet the foundational premise of Hoover's advance remained influential, that unified black political advancement could destabilize an American order. In my view, Hoover did not simply react to perceived threats, he defined them. By framing black cohesion as national danger, he embedded that suspicion into the architecture of federal surveillance. What satire calls the man did not vanish with COINTELPRO. It evolved within institutions that still wrestle with the line between security and the fear of transformation. And just a side note, before we close out, Donald Trump and all his business associates within their surveillance have added more AI to upload our information to a database for them to have. The man still working diligently. So it is up for us to recognize the systems, recognize the patterns, so that we be able to have our own autonomy. So with that being said, finish the conversation down in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel, and I also have clothes that you can check out in the description box. I'm gonna bring this video to an end, and I want you to be you, do you, see the bigger picture. Have a fantastic day because you deserve it. Stay safe.